You'll embarrass me. Just don't come to the wedding. The long, cold dial tone echoed in the silence. The phone slipped from my calloused hand, clattering onto the oil-stained floor of the garage. My eyes fell involuntarily to the long scar that traced its way down my limping leg, the medal I'd earned in the very accident that saved her life. My daughter. Hanging on the wall, the brand-new suit I'd bought for her big day was still wrapped in plastic, a dream torn to shreds. You might think the story that follows is about a broken father's tears, but you'd be wrong. That wasn't the sound of a man breaking. It was the terrifying silence just before a hidden legend decides to reclaim everything he's owed. And you will never guess that the payback for such ingratitude would begin with a 10 a.m. financial news bulletin. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. Early that morning, the May sunlight cut through the grimy windows of my garage, painting pale yellow stripes across the grease-slicked concrete floor. The scent of gasoline, motor oil, and burnt rubber had become my familiar perfume, the air I'd breathed every day for the past 20 years. I am John, a mechanic with hands like worn leather and a jagged scar running from my calf to my ankle. That scar wasn't just the mark of an accident, it was a permanent reminder of the day I lost my wife, Helen, but saved my daughter, Anna. The car crash 15 years ago took a part of me, but in return, it gave me everything. Anna. To me, the scar on my leg was never a flaw. It was a badge of honor, won for the love of my life. It told the story of a father who fought, who sacrificed. But I never boasted. I lived a simple, diligent life, working from dawn till dusk in my small garage, saving every penny for my daughter's future. I wanted Anna to have the full, bright life my wife would never get to see. In just 2 days, my Anna was getting married. I was so excited I'd even bought a new suit, the first time in years I'd spent anything on myself. It hung on a hook, still pristine in its plastic wrap. I stood there just looking at it, imagining myself walking my daughter down the aisle. My heart hammered like a child's. I picked up my phone and called Anna. "Sweetheart, Dad bought a new suit. I'll be there bright and early tomorrow, ready to walk you down the aisle. Do you want me to pick you up?" My voice trembled with a mixture of eagerness and nerves. On the other end of the line, Anna's voice was no longer the clear, bright thing I knew. It was cold and distant. I could hear the faint sound of classical music and hushed voices in the background, as if she were in a world utterly foreign to me. "Dad, I already told you. You don't need to come early, and you don't need to walk me. The groom will do that." Her tone was clipped, hurried, as if she were trying to end the conversation before it could truly begin. I clung to one last thread of hope. "But I'm your father, the father who always dreamed of walking his little girl down that aisle." A sharp tisk came through the line, and then her voice turned harsh, almost a shout. "Don't you get it? My friends and my husband's family, they're wealthy, they're high class. I don't want people staring at your limp and feeling sorry for me. You'll embarrass me. Just don't come to the wedding." Every word sounded rehearsed, devoid of emotion, as if they belonged to someone else, to a world I could never touch. The dial tone that followed was a long, cold blade. The phone slipped from my hand, falling to the dry concrete. It felt like a piece of my heart, shattering on the floor. This pain, it was worse than any physical wound. It didn't draw blood, but it shattered every dream, every hope I had nurtured for 15 years. I stood frozen, looking down at my own limping leg. Suddenly, the badge of honor felt like the disgrace Anna had called it. I didn't cry. Hot tears mixed with grease, and I wiped them away numbly. Instead, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. I looked at a photo of Anna as a child, her bright, carefree smile beaming as she sat on my shoulders. In that picture, I was still a whole man, with 2 good legs. The photo was a ghost of a life long gone. I spoke to myself, my voice a low, resolute growl. "All right, Anna, you've made your choice, and I will show you that this limp of mine is nothing to be ashamed of." In that moment of despair, I refused to surrender. There was one last glimmer of hope. I thought of Lily, Anna's best friend and maid of honor. Lily used to come to the garage with Anna when they were kids, and I'd always thought of her as a second daughter. I picked up the phone and dialed, forcing my voice to be as calm as possible. "Hello, Lily, it's Uncle John." "Oh, Uncle John. I'm doing great. I'm so excited to see you tomorrow. Is everything okay?" Lily's voice was as friendly as ever, but tinged with haste. I just wanted to ask you something. Anna doesn't want me to walk her down the aisle. Was there a change of plans?" There was a pause on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was troubled. "Uncle John, you know I love you, but things here aren't as simple as you think. The groom's family has very strict standards. Anna's under a lot of pressure. I don't think I can interfere with this. I'm sure Anna will understand your heart." Lily added a few more pleasantries and quickly ended the call. My hand fell to my side. It felt as if every door had just been slammed shut in my face. Even her best friend wouldn't stand with me. They were all afraid of being associated with the mechanic's troubles, afraid of being ostracized by the high-class world they were so desperate to join. I realized then that I was utterly alone. But that loneliness didn't break me. It forged me. I understood that this was no longer just about my feelings. This was about a priceless lesson in human worth. And I, John, was going to teach my daughter that lesson, even if it cost me everything I had. I didn't sleep that night. I sat silently in the garage, next to the rusted frame of the car from the crash 15 years ago. The metal was cold, but the memory was searing hot, as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. The shriek of tires on the rain-slicked road, the wrenching groan of twisted metal and the explosive shatter of glass, a symphony of chaos. The car flipped, rolling several times before slamming into a tree. Smoke and dirt filled the air. I tried to move, my body pinned by what felt like a ton of concrete. Helen's door was jammed shut. From the back seat, I heard my daughter, Anna, screaming in terror. "Daddy, I'm scared." I looked over at Helen. She was unconscious, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. My door was crushed, but there was a small gap, just enough. I could get out, but Anna couldn't. My right leg was trapped beneath a twisted steel bar. The pain was bone deep, but it didn't register. All I could think about was Anna. My mind was pure instinct, driven by a single desperate need: save my daughter. "Anna, don't be afraid. Daddy's here," I grunted, trying to soothe her. My eyes scanned the wreckage. A broken piece of rebar lay nearby. With every ounce of strength I had, I gritted my teeth and jammed the rebar into the space where my leg was trapped. A dry, sickening crack echoed in the car. Pain exploded through my body, but my leg was free. Blood poured from the wound, but there was no time. I scrambled out of the car and pulled Anna from the back seat. She trembled in my arms, sobbing. I looked back at the car, at Helen, still motionless. My heart seized, but I knew I had to go. Small flames were beginning to lick at the engine. I had saved Anna, but I had lost Helen forever. The scar on my leg was the artifact of that moment. It reminded me of sacrifice, of a father's unconditional love. It was proof of the most painful decision of my life. But to Anna, all she saw was a limp, something shameful. No physical pain, no matter how great, could compare to the agony of being rejected by my own child. I stared at the car's frame and vowed once more that I would not let this scar become meaningless. The next morning, with the new suit still hanging in its plastic shroud, I put on my oil-stained work clothes and drove my old pickup truck to an address downtown. It led me to a glittering glass skyscraper that pierced the morning sky. I, a simple mechanic, stood before the headquarters of the Green Technology Fund. This place, like me, had changed. I remembered when it was just a small, messy garage filled with ambition. David and I, two young men, had spent entire nights arguing over engine designs and the future of clean energy. Now he was one of the most powerful men in the city, and I was still just John. I didn't call ahead. I walked straight in, startling the young, beautiful receptionist at the front desk. She eyed me with suspicion, as if I'd wandered into the wrong building. "I have an appointment with David," I said, my voice even. "David?" She raised an eyebrow, unfamiliar with such a casual address. "You mean our CEO, Mr. David Miller?" I nodded. She dialed her phone, her voice laced with caution. "Sir, there's a man here named John. He says he has an appointment." A few seconds later, a familiar, excited voice boomed through the receiver. "John? Send him up immediately." I could hear the receptionist's audible gasp. David was waiting for me at the elevator, his face a mask of shock and delight. "John, I can't believe you're here." He pulled me into his office, shutting the door firmly behind us. "I tried to contact you so many times, but you just vanished off the face of the earth. You know, we used to dream about this. Look at it, John. It all came true." I glanced around the luxurious office, the awards, the plaques, all testaments to David's success. But I knew that deep down, a part of it was mine. "I know," I said, my voice low. "I've been following the fund." "You've done well." David sat down, his eyes locking with mine. "But why, John? Why did you walk away from it all? One night, I remember it perfectly. After the accident, you said you couldn't continue, that you wanted a normal life. Did you think I wouldn't understand? We built this together. You gave up the money, the fame, everything." I looked out the window at the city sprawling beneath us. "You're right, David. Money and fame can't buy you peace, and I wanted Anna to have a father, not a wealthy CEO. I wanted to be there for her, to take her to the park, to read her stories at night. I wanted to be a real father, a limping one maybe, but a father nonetheless." David was silent. He understood. He saw a part of himself in me. "So why now? After all these years, why come back?" I turned back to him, my gaze resolute. "Because of my daughter. She's getting married tomorrow, and she doesn't want me there. She says I'll embarrass her." David was stunned into silence. "I don't understand." "Anna was everything to you. She was the reason you left, and now she's the reason you're back?" "That's right," I said, "and this time I need her to understand that this limp of mine is nothing to be ashamed of. I need your help, David." David didn't ask another question. He just nodded. "What do you need, John?" "I need the truth of what happened 15 years ago. I want everyone to know who sacrificed everything to save his daughter. Her father is not just some common mechanic." Leaving David's office, I felt a spark of hope mixed with the heavy weight of loneliness. David could help with the media and financial firepower, but for the plan at the church to work, I needed someone on the inside, someone I could trust. My first thought was Lily. But should I drag her into this? Would I be putting her in an impossible position, forcing her to choose between me and Anna? The hesitation gnawed at me. But then I realized, if even Lily had changed, if she too had chosen that superficial world, then perhaps I truly had nothing left to hope for. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. "Hello, Uncle John?" Her voice on the other end sounded surprised and a little rushed. "Hi, Lily. I'm sorry to bother you again." I kept my voice steady. "I just wanted to see how you were." "Are all the wedding preparations going smoothly?" There was a pause. I heard a soft sigh. "Yes, they're fine." Her voice dipped. "Uncle, please don't be mad at Anna. She's been different lately. She's under so much pressure." I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. A little warmth returned to my chest. She was still the same Lily. I paused, gathering my courage. "Lily, can I ask you for a favor? It's very important, and I need you to keep it an absolute secret, even from Anna." The line went quiet. I could feel her inner struggle. Then a determined voice came through. "Tell me what you need. You've always been so good to me. I'll help you, if it's the right thing to do." A profound sense of gratitude washed over me. I wasn't completely alone. "Thank you, Lily. I have an envelope. Inside is the truth about my life, about Anna's life. I need it delivered directly into the priest's hands before the ceremony begins. Only the priest can help Anna see her mistake without destroying her completely." "I understand," Lily whispered, her voice firm. "You can trust me. I'll make sure the envelope gets to him safely, for you and for the Anna we used to know." After hanging up, I stared out the garage window. For the first time since that fateful call with Anna, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. David's words had given me strength. From the moment I left his office, I began a journey back in time. My goal was clear: not revenge, but recovery. The recovery of the truth, piece by piece. I went to an old bookstore I used to frequent for Anna's books. A faded photo album was tucked away in a dusty corner. As I turned the brittle pages, time-stained pictures emerged. There was David and me, young, grinning, hands black with grease but eyes full of hope. There was Helen and me, hand in hand, happiness radiating from our smiles. And there was Anna, a chubby, carefree little girl sitting on my shoulders. Looking at those photos, I saw the stark contrast between the John of yesterday and the John of today, but deep in my eyes, the same resolve remained. Next, I went to the old hospital. It had been rebuilt over the years, but I still knew every corner by heart. I went to the records archive and found an older nurse who had worked there for decades. I gave her my name and Helen's. Her eyes lit up when she saw my name. "I remember you. You were the man who refused painkillers so you could take care of your daughter. You were so brave." Her words were a balm, an acknowledgment I hadn't received from anyone in years. She pulled the medical files for Helen, Anna, and me, proof that my scar wasn't a defect, but a sacrifice. Finally, I went to the police station. The officer on duty was young and eyed me suspiciously, but after I explained, he helped me find the accident report from 15 years ago. The report stated plainly, "Driver, John, successfully extricated his daughter from the burning vehicle after it had overturned." There was no emotion, no talk of heroes, just the truth, a cold, hard truth with immense weight. I carefully placed all the documents into a large envelope: the old photo album, the medical records, the accident report. I wrote a short letter to go with them. No accusations, no anger, just a sincere telling of my story. It would all be delivered to the priest tomorrow. That night I went to the cemetery. There was no one else there, just me and the silent tombstones. The wind rustled through the dry leaves, a lonely, whispering sound. I knelt before Helen's grave. I didn't come here often, but every time I did, I felt her presence beside me. "Helen," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Today, I did something, and I don't know if it was right. I've set a plan in motion to teach our daughter a lesson." I told her about Anna's call, about her bitter words. "I don't hate her, Helen. I'm just in so much pain. I taught her how to get back up every time she fell, but I failed to teach her what's truly valuable. I let her get lost in the empty glamour of things and forget what really matters." I touched the cold marble of the headstone. "I know you wouldn't want me to hurt her. But you know what? Sometimes a small wound can save a life. I believe this is the only way to save Anna. I have to show her that the world she's trying to join is just a game, a stage play for show. She needs to realize that a person's worth isn't in their money, but in their sincerity, their gratitude, their love. Do you agree with me?" I stood up and looked at the grave. The moon was bright, casting a silver light, and stars glittered overhead. A strange sense of peace settled over me. The plan was ready. I had the evidence. I had David's support. And most importantly, I felt I had the blessing of Helen, the wife I had lost, who I believed was still watching over me. Tomorrow, the show would begin, and I, John, would be the one to bring down the curtain. In the church's luxurious bridal suite, the air was thick with the cloyingly sweet scent of lilies and a silent, simmering tension. Anna was a vision in her custom-designed wedding gown. The dress was more than just clothing. It was a symbol of the new life she craved. Every stitch, every crystal sewn into the bodice sparkled as if to announce her arrival in another world. Her hair was swept up in an elaborate style, adorned with white lilies. Looking in the mirror, she saw a stranger, a powerful woman ready to step into high society. But deep in her eyes there was an unmistakable emptiness. Her entire body was braced against a storm of emotion. Every breath was heavy, every heartbeat a dull thud. The chatter and laughter of her bridesmaids sounded distant, like a melodyless tune. Their whispers, however, found their way to her ears, each word a needle prick to her heart. "Anna, I heard your father was busy with work?" "Nothing serious, I hope?" one friend asked, her eyes betraying a sharp curiosity. "That's what I heard, too. You know, her dad's a mechanic. She's probably embarrassed. A bit of an eccentric. You'd think he'd be proud his daughter is marrying into such wealth." Anna forced a smile, pretending she couldn't hear, but her heart constricted. Their words were a slap in the face to all her efforts, to the perfect facade she had so carefully constructed. When she arrived at the church, a few of her relatives came to offer congratulations. "Anna, you look beautiful. I tried calling your father, but he didn't pick up. Where is he?" Anna gave a vague, dismissive answer, her voice trembling slightly. The groom's family approached with strained smiles, explaining awkwardly that her father had been called away on an urgent matter. It was a perfectly crafted lie, but everyone could feel the tension suffocating the room. As the church doors swung open, every head turned. A moment of silence stretched on as all eyes fell on her. Tradition dictated that her father would take her arm and lead her to the altar. But today, Anna walked on the arm of William, her groom. The faces of her relatives clouded with surprise and confusion. They exchanged glances, wondering about John's absence. Their eyes seemed to ask, "Why? Why isn't her father here?" The whispers began to ripple through the pews. Anna's face went pale. The priest, a man who had presided over hundreds of weddings, stood at the pulpit, his expression grave. His gaze wasn't just on the bride and groom, it seemed to pierce straight into their souls. Before the service he had met with Anna privately in his study. His eyes were gentle but firm. "My child, I've read your father's letter," he had said. "I don't know what has happened between you, but I urge you to reconsider. I am willing to wait. This entire church is willing to wait until your father arrives. This wedding will not be whole without him." Anna had refused. "I'm sorry, Father. I can't." Now his voice filled the church. His sermon wasn't the usual homily on love and marriage. It was a story about filial piety. The love of marriage is a sacred bond between two people. But before we ever find that love, we are given a greater one, the unconditional love of a parent. He spoke warmly, but his eyes were sharp. It is the greatest blessing we receive. A parent's love asks for nothing in return. They only love and sacrifice. They give their entire lives to raise us so that we may have a better life. I pray that you will both remember this on your journey together. For how can a person who does not cherish the love of their parents ever hope to cherish a love that is meant to be eternal? The priest's words swept through the church like a sudden cold wind. The entire congregation fell silent, the tension now palpable. William's mother, Eleanor, a woman who valued decorum and status above all else, began to look at Anna and William with suspicion. A flush of shame crept up her neck. She leaned over and whispered fiercely to William, "What is going on?" Anna was ashen. Her heart pounded in her chest. She knew. Her father had sent a message only she could truly understand. The ceremony concluded in an atmosphere of strained discomfort. The smile on Anna's face was frozen. Each step she took a heavy burden. William and his parents walked beside her, trying to maintain an air of normalcy, but they weren't fooling anyone. The moment they were outside, Eleanor pulled Anna and William into a secluded corner beside a cold stone pillar. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were like shards of ice. "Anna, you told me your father was called away urgently, but the priest's words were pointed, and several people have asked me about it." Eleanor's face was taut with anger and disappointment. "A wedding with hundreds of guests, after all the money and effort we have invested, cannot be ruined by gossip. Our family's reputation is paramount. You will ensure this is handled and that there will be no further scandal." Eleanor and her husband left abruptly for the waiting limousine, leaving Anna and William alone. The air grew heavier. William, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice lower than usual. "Anna, I don't know why you did this. I'm just worried. I'm worried you've made a terrible mistake." Anna felt cornered. "William, I just didn't want to embarrass you." "Trust me, everything will be fine." The ceremony ended under a cloud of tension. Several of Anna's relatives, having witnessed the charade, declined to attend the reception. "Anna, we won't be coming to the party." "Something's come up," one said, her face a mixture of pity and disappointment. The bride and groom exited the church not to a chorus of blessings, but to a sea of curious, judgmental stares. The gleaming white limousine was waiting, but as Anna stepped inside, it felt less like a chariot to a new life and more like a hearse. The laughter and excitement were gone. In their place was a terrifying silence. I sat in my old pickup, parked in a discreet spot on the street opposite the church, close enough to see everything but far enough to remain invisible. Through the dusty windshield, I watched Anna emerge from the church on William's arm. She was radiant, but her smile was brittle and her eyes were empty. She had gotten everything she wanted: a lavish wedding, a wealthy husband, the world she so desperately craved. But the price was the denial of her own father. I saw William's mother pull her aside, gesturing and speaking sharply. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel her anger, see the condescending, scrutinizing look in her eyes. William just stood by, not defending Anna. The sight was like an invisible hand squeezing my heart. It seemed that in her new world my daughter was nothing more than a puppet in their play. A profound sadness washed over me. Perhaps my decision was the right one. This was the only way to teach her a lesson she would never forget. Just then, my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Uncle John, it's William." His voice was trembling slightly, full of confusion. "I'm sorry. I know things at the church were not good." I didn't think it would be so tense. "Uncle, I know Anna didn't want you here, but I think you should come to the reception." My heart hammered. William's offer was a tiny flicker of light in the darkness, a chance for me to back down, to abandon this insane plan. I took a deep breath, my voice low and raspy when I spoke. "William," I said, "I appreciate your kindness, but she's made her choice. She doesn't want a father with a limp standing beside her on her big day. She doesn't want to embarrass you or your family." "No, Uncle, I don't think so." "I really want you to come. I can have a driver pick you up." "You can come in through a side entrance," William pleaded, his voice sincere. I looked towards the gleaming limousine waiting for them. My daughter stood there, alone and awkward. A bitter taste filled my mouth. They would only accept me as a patron, not as a father. "William," I said, my voice turning colder, "thank you, but that won't be necessary. Someone is already there to represent me. You and Anna should go on to the party. There will be a little surprise waiting for you." I hung up before he could say another word. I glanced at the small photo of a smiling, carefree Anna taped to my dashboard, sitting on my shoulders. My heart ached, but I knew there was no turning back. This was the last lesson I could teach my daughter, a lesson I prayed she would never forget. I sat in my old garage, the frantic rhythm of my heart outpacing the sound of a sputtering engine. The familiar smell of oil and burnt rubber, which usually brought me a sense of peace, now smelled like the eve of a battle. In front of me, a tablet and a large monitor were set up, a sophisticated arrangement remotely controlled by David, my old friend and partner. Through the screens, I had a clear view of the entire opulent reception hall. It felt like watching a blockbuster movie that I was directing, waiting for the final decisive shot. David fed me updates through a Bluetooth earpiece. "The hall looks like a palace, John. But the mood is incredibly strained. I'd say only about 60% of the guests showed up. The ones who looked upset at the church didn't come." His voice was low, but I could hear the tension. Though I wasn't there, I could picture the face of Eleanor, my daughter's new mother-in-law. She would be furious, forcing a rigid smile, trying to hold together a play that was already falling apart. She kept glancing at her watch, her anxiety evident in every gesture. I saw Anna standing beside William, trying to smile. She had changed into another magnificent gown, but her eyes were vacant, lifeless. Her smile never reached them. Perhaps she sensed that something was wrong. It occurred to me then that the very things she had yearned for, the splendor, the status, were the things now caging her. She was trapped in the gilded cage she had willingly entered, in the artificial world she had chosen, leaving me on the outside. Melodious music drifted through the hall, but it wasn't enough to dispel the oppressive atmosphere. William's father, Arthur, was trying to make small talk with guests, but his face was strung as tight as a piano wire. I knew he was trying to save face for both families, little knowing that in a few minutes everything they had built would come crashing down. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the enter button. I took one last deep breath. This was the point of no return. Part of me wanted to stop. I looked at the screen, at Anna's forced smile. Am I doing the right thing? I asked myself. Will she ever understand? But then I remembered her words, the words that had shattered my heart. "You'll embarrass me." I told myself this wasn't about destruction. It was about teaching her a lesson she couldn't learn from anyone else. The clock struck 10. I closed my eyes, felt a sharp pain lance through my chest, and pressed enter. There was no ding, no sound of confirmation, just the silence of a decision made. In that instant, I imagined the storm breaking. On every large screen in the reception hall, the smiling images of Anna and William vanished. They were replaced by an emergency news bulletin from a prestigious financial network. The headline blazed in red. "Secretive billionaire John Smith, silent founder of the Green Technology Fund, announces historic 10th anniversary endowment." I watched as the guests fell silent, their heads tilting up in disbelief. They murmured, exchanging confused glances. The faces of Eleanor and Arthur Miller turned sheet white. She looked like she was about to collapse. They couldn't believe it. The man being celebrated as John Smith, the visionary investor, the hidden billionaire, was the same mechanic their new daughter-in-law had just disowned. The broadcast cut to a short documentary piece featuring an interview with David. Standing in front of a modern skyscraper, David spoke of my vision, of the struggles we had overcome, and of my reason for stepping away from the limelight. He said I never cared for money, only for the time it could give me with my family, with my daughter. Every word he spoke was a dagger to the heart of the lies Anna had constructed. Simultaneously, in a corner of the hall, a large draped plaque was unveiled. Engraved on it were the words, "Honoring John Smith and his late wife, Helen Smith, the anonymous patrons who have quietly sustained this scholarship fund for the past 10 years. Below the text was a faded photograph of a man carrying a little girl from a wreckage, his leg clearly injured. That man was me. That little girl was Anna. The hall erupted in a roar of whispers. People pulled out their phones, frantically searching for Green Technology Fund and John Smith. The truth was now public. Some guests shot Anna looks of piercing scrutiny. Others stared at the groom's family with open contempt. The contrast between my sacrifice and Anna's ingratitude was now blindingly clear. The tribute plaque was unveiled, the photo of a father saving his daughter from the wreckage, a final hammer blow to the facade. The reception hall was drowning in shocked whispers. Eleanor and Arthur Miller stood frozen, their faces shifting from pale white to sheer panic. But their nightmare was just beginning. On the large screens, the financial news anchor suddenly adopted a grave tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are just receiving exclusive breaking news, and it will have a major impact on the market when it opens on Monday morning." Everyone held their breath. According to our sources, the Green Technology Fund, under a direct mandate from its founder, John Smith, has issued a formal press release regarding a strategic repositioning of its investment portfolio for the upcoming quarter. Most notably, the fund will immediately cease funding and recall all committed investments in the Green Miller Smart City project, led by the Miller Corporation. If the first announcement was a bomb to their reputation, this one was a financial nuclear warhead. The anchor continued, her voice as cold as a death sentence. The reason cited is that the project no longer aligns with the ethical and social responsibility criteria that the fund champions. Analysts predict this move will strip the Miller Corporation of its core capital, pushing it to face immediate insolvency and potential bankruptcy. A loud crash echoed through the hall. Arthur Miller had dropped his champagne flute. The powerful man's face was now ashen. He staggered, grabbing onto a chair to keep himself upright. His entire fortune, his reputation, the future of the Miller Corporation, it was all built on that project, on the massive capital from the fund. In a corner of the room, several guests who were investors were already on their phones, the ping of stock alerts sounding off. One man exclaimed loud enough for everyone to hear, "My God! Miller's stock is wiped out. It's all gone." The atmosphere was no longer just awkward. It was thick with the stench of ruin. Everyone understood. This was no coincidence. This was a precisely calculated punishment. John Smith wasn't just reclaiming his honor. He was using his financial power to level the empire his daughter had so blindly chased. This revenge wasn't just making them lose face. It was making them lose everything. The silence in the hall was now thick and heavy as lead. The announcement from the Green Technology Fund was a public death sentence for the Miller family. After a moment of stunned paralysis, Arthur Miller, the man who had just lost an empire, finally moved. But he didn't pull Anna aside to question her. Number. This humiliation had to be answered with a greater one, public and merciless. His face an emotionless, stone-cold mask, he strode onto the stage where the wedding band was standing in confused silence. He snatched the microphone from the singer's hand. A piercing shriek of feedback made everyone flinch. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice trembling with rage, but still attempting a tone of command. The eyes of every guest, every camera, every phone were fixed on him. He didn't look at Anna, but every word was a poisoned dart aimed directly at her. Today was meant to be a joyous day for our family. We prepared for a momentous occasion to welcome a new member. He paused, sweeping his gaze across the room before his eyes, sharp as daggers, finally landed on Anna, who stood like a statue in the middle of the floor. "But it appears," he hissed, "that our family has made a disastrous misjudgment of a person's character and background. We will not, under any circumstances, tolerate deceit and disrespect." Every word was a slap across Anna's face. She could feel the hundreds of eyes on her, filled with contempt, pity, and morbid fascination. And then he delivered the killing blow. "For the honor of the Miller family, I, Arthur Miller, hereby formally declare that the marriage between my son, William Miller, and Miss Anna Smith is annulled, effective immediately." The word "annulled" echoed through the vast hall. He threw the microphone to the floor. The dry, final thud was like the sound of a prison door slamming shut. Eleanor and William, their faces blank, joined Arthur on the stage. Without another word, the three of them turned their backs on Anna and marched out of the reception hall as everyone watched in stunned silence. They didn't just leave. They discarded her like a worthless object. Anna stood alone in her magnificent wedding gown at the epicenter of the ruin she had created. The whispers erupted again, the flashes of cameras firing relentlessly. She had finally gotten the attention she craved, but it wasn't admiration. It was infamy. She had become the tragic star of her own life's great catastrophe. The silence in the hall was now thick and heavy as lead. The announcement from the Green Technology Fund was a public death sentence for the Miller family. After a moment of stunned paralysis, Arthur Miller, the man who had just lost an empire, finally moved. But he didn't pull Anna aside to question her. Number. This humiliation had to be answered with a greater one, public and merciless. His face an emotionless, stone-cold mask, he strode onto the stage where the wedding band was standing in confused silence. He snatched the microphone from the singer's hand. A piercing shriek of feedback made everyone flinch. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice trembling with rage, but still attempting a tone of command. The eyes of every guest, every camera, every phone were fixed on him. He didn't look at Anna, but every word was a poisoned dart aimed directly at her. Today was meant to be a joyous day for our family. We prepared for a momentous occasion to welcome a new member. He paused, sweeping his gaze across the room before his eyes, sharp as daggers, finally landed on Anna, who stood like a statue in the middle of the floor. "But it appears," he hissed, "that our family has made a disastrous misjudgment of a person's character and background. We will not, under any circumstances, tolerate deceit and disrespect." Every word was a slap across Anna's face. She could feel the hundreds of eyes on her, filled with contempt, pity, and morbid fascination. And then he delivered the killing blow. "For the honor of the Miller family, I, Arthur Miller, hereby formally declare that the marriage between my son, William Miller, and Miss Anna Smith is annulled, effective immediately." The word annulled echoed through the vast hall. He threw the microphone to the floor. The dry, final thud was like the sound of a prison door slamming shut. Eleanor and William, their faces blank, joined Arthur on the stage. Without another word, the three of them turned their backs on Anna and marched out of the reception hall as everyone watched in stunned silence. They didn't just leave. They discarded her like a worthless object. Anna stood alone in her magnificent wedding gown at the epicenter of the ruin she had created. The whispers erupted again, the flashes of cameras firing relentlessly. She had finally gotten the attention she craved, but it wasn't admiration. It was infamy. She had become the tragic star of her own life's great catastrophe. Thank you for listening to the story until the end. If you've ever been through a similar situation or have any thoughts on this story, please share them in the comments so we can discuss them together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.